Waterford North Quays. A Development Vision. October 1998. This report was initiated by the Waterford City Manager Mr. Eddie Breen, in response to a request by Waterford Corporation, in conjunction with Mr. John Clancy, General Manager, and the Waterford Harbour Commissioners. The Minister for State at the Department of Finance, with special responsibility for the Office of Public Works, Martin Cullen TD, was invited to chair a steering group to prepare this report. Minister Cullen asked the Chairman of the Office of Public Works, Mr. Barry Murphy, to arrange for the preparation of a development vision through the architectural services of the office. Table of Contents. 1. Introduction. 2. Executive Summary. 2.1. Strategy. 2.2. Vision. 3. The North Quays area in context. 3.1 Physical analysis. 3.2 Transport infrastructure. 3.3 History. 3.4 Strengths and advantages. 4. Objectives of the Framework Plan for the North Quays. 4.1 The City. 4.2 Realizing an Urban Project. 4.3 Site Ordering Devices. 4.3.1 Reference Buildings. 4.3.2 Key Nodal Points and Spaces. 4.3.3 Access and Circulation. 4.3.4 Territories. 4.3.5 Existing Buildings. 4.3.6 Uses. 4.3.7 Visual Axes. 4.3.8 Landscape Elements. 5. Proposed Projects and Opportunities. 5.1 Commuter Ferry. 5.2 Spine Road. 5.3 Pedestrian Walk. 5.4 Hotel and Marina. 5.5 Venue Building. 5.6 Mixed Development. 5.7 Cruise Liner Docking Station. 5.8 Public Spaces. This audio version of this document is being automatically read by the Amazon Polly service, a neural language, cloud service engine, using the UK English, Male, Brian settings for best clarity. Irish accent is not available at this time. Part 1. Introduction. With the opening up of the new Europort downstream from Waterford, the former port area on the North Quays has been freed up for development, which will have a significant impact on the city of Waterford. In recognition of the potential impact on the city, a study to demonstrate how best the overall development might proceed has been undertaken by the Office of Public Works. This document, entitled The North Quays Waterford, A Development Vision, examines the development potential of the site, and its impact on the existing city and infrastructure. It is an aspiration of this report, that the local and central statutory authorities would adopt the thrust of the vision and would ensure that all interests, resources and energies embedded in the Quays are focused towards the common aim of seeing the vision realized. The report offers suggestions for the potential of the Quays, and can act as a planning framework for the development of the North Quays, contributing to the cultural, social and commercial life of Waterford. While the contents of this report are specific, an urban framework plan is by its very nature concerned with the greater context. It must facilitate the careful development of the North Quays, within the context of the existing city, and be both vibrant and sustainable. Part 2, Executive Summary. The quays along the north side of the river shore in Waterford will be underused and in time an eyesore, from the waterfront on the South Quay. However, it provides a unique opportunity for development, creating a dynamic transformation of the area, which will contribute to the re-emergence of Waterford as an important and active centre, both in an Irish and European context. This site directly faces the South Quays, and any development would therefore not only be clearly visible for its entire length, but it would also afford the best views of the historic city centre. Development of the North Quays will have a dual role, of creating its own coherent image and identity, and also integrating with the rest of the city. Examination of the site indicates that there is scope to utilize imaginative measures to overcome the limitations, and to add to the attractiveness and quality of life proposed for that quarter. This site is, for many visitors to Waterford, the first interface with the city. It is also part of an immediate landscape of dramatic scale prompted by the cliff face and steep hill. Studies of the landscape, built and natural, the setting, scale of existing development, and the recent history and uses of the quays, confirm the potential for suitable mixed development. The elements that comprise the character of the site, make up an integrated landscape of different scale and quality to that evident on the South City. It is this quality in conjunction with the strategic location of the site, both locally and regionally, that can provide the dynamic for this part of the city, to evolve economically and socially. The strategy proposed in this report takes the above strengths of the North Quays as its starting point, as well as addressing other parallel issues. 2.1 Strategy. The strategies proposed will encompass the following. 1. Integrating the framework plan into its immediate context, in order to propel development, which will strengthen the existing situation while promoting the new. 2. Achieving a coherent image for the North Quays, which enhances its environment, and which will add a dynamic to the image of the entire city of Waterford. 3. Ensuring the economic and social survival of the North Quays development as an area-based centre, part of and contributing to the entire city. 4. Promoting mutual interdependence between activities on both sides of the river, by both creating public activities on the North Quays and providing a commuter ferry across the river. 5. Creating a pedestrian walk through the site that links a series of open spaces and events, serving as a thread that binds the development in itself and to the rest of the city. 6. Establishing node projects at intervals along the quays, to which other building, public spaces and activities will attach themselves, creating integrated composed sectors. 7. Maintaining the existing scale of the North Quays and surrounding landscape, as a connection to its past, and as a statement for its future. 8. A mix of uses is promoted along the site, with concentration of complementary activities at certain points. 2.2 Vision. The vision for the development proposes the following elements. 1. Commuter ferry. 2. Spine road. 3. Pedestrian walk. 4. Hotel and marina. 5. Venue building. 6. Mixed development. 7. Cruise liner docking station. 8. Public spaces. Part 3, the North Quays in context. 3.1, Physical analysis. 3.2, Transport infrastructure. 3.3, History. 3.4, Strengths and advantages. 3.1, Physical analysis. This report examines the section of the quays that stretches along the north edge of the river shore, between Rice Bridge and Abbey Church. Its southern boundary is the river, while to the north, it is contained by the railway line. Along the 1.5 miles of its length, the land varies between 40 meters and 80 meters in width. It is an assembly of a variety of independent man-made wharves. The ground is flat at just under 3 meters above sea level, at Od Marlin Head. The natural landscape behind the quays rises sharply to the east. The dock road and railway line run side by side between the quays and high ground, until the railway slips under the road as it meets the bridge. The quays are mostly open empty space, in which lifting cranes, temporary storage sheds, large mill buildings and silos sit, as reminders of Waterford's industrial and maritime history. The development of a Europort, 4 miles downstream, is gradually relocating the port activity. With the exception of the railway station, Jury's Hotel, schools, a church and the low-rise residential community of Ferrybank, most of the city of Waterford is located on the south of the river. Only in relatively recent history has the boundary of the city stretched across the river. The North Quays therefore, give a definite physical and psychological edge to the city. The river shore has a width of between 140 meters and 240 meters as it passes through the city. The distance between opposing frontages allows full vistas of both sides from almost any viewpoint. The North Quays site is always viewed against the background of rising hills, with the river in the foreground. Spectacular views of the South Quays are afforded from any point on the site at present, with reciprocal wide views to the north from the southern waterfront and framed views, created through many southern streets, which run at right angles to the river. The sunny North Quays have an unobstructed south orientation. 3.2 Transport infrastructure. The North Quays lie in Ferrybank, on the edge of the city and to the eastern edge of the city centre. This area is well served infrastructurally. The national road network connecting the passenger port of Rosslare to Cork runs behind almost the entire length of the quays, across Rice Bridge and along the length of the South Quays. Waterford Regional Airport, 8 miles from the city, facilitates daily flights to Luton or Stansted in the United Kingdom, while bus services travel frequently to Dublin, Wexford, and Cork. The railway station to the west of the North Quays principally serves Dublin and Limerick. The railway line that forms the northern boundary to the docks carries one passenger train to Rosslare and another one from Rosslare every day. Waterford Port is one of the nearest and largest Irish ports to continental Europe, strengthened by its direct freight and shipping services, from the whole of Ireland directly to the UK and Europe. Passenger cruise liners also visit the city during the summer season. The North Quays is well served by transport infrastructure. 1. National primary routes. 2. Rail. 3. Bus. 4. Air. 5. Quays and Europort. 3.3 History. Waterford has a 1,000-year history, evolving from a Viking settlement to a medieval defensive walled city, on the south bank of the shore. Waterford was founded when the Vikings turned from raiding to trading, and by the middle of the 12th century it was a well-established community, with its own civil and ecclesiastical organizations. In 1170 it was captured by the invading Norman army led by Strongbow. Subsequently, King Henry II arrived, with a strong army of occupation to prevent Strongbow from setting up a separate kingdom, and to receive submissions from both Irish kings and Norman lords. Meanwhile, the Viking inhabitants were mostly expelled to the western edge of the city. It was with the succession of King John that Waterford established its importance. A series of charters were bestowed on the city, which established Waterford as a distinct administrative unit, with a special relationship to the king, based on the privileges granted by him to the citizens and on their obligations to him. In a charter of incorporation, granted by King John to the citizens of Waterford, the mention of a ferryboat linking the provinces of Leinster and Munster was included. The earliest evidence of a ferry service across the river was in the late 17th century. The 1764 Scales and Richards map of Waterford shows a ferryboat landing stage on the city quay. It also shows a small development on the northern side of the river called Ferrybank and an area just behind called Mount Sion. In the 18th century the city expanded beyond the city walls, and the port developed along the south edge of the river shore. During the 19th century the Industrial Revolution brought, not only the railway to Waterford, but steamships providing a regular passenger and freight service to and from Britain. At this time Ferrybank developed as a port, and industrial area serving the railway and shipbuilding. For the citizens of Waterford, in the 19th century, the North Shore was a destination for picnics, boating and other leisure activities. The tradition has continued, establishing the North Shore as a type of annex to the city, and it retains that characteristic mainly due to limited activities and untended areas there. 3.4 Strengths and advantages. 1. It is a contained site with the river to the south, railway and hill behind. 2. South orientation. 3. Unobstructed views downstream and across the river to the South Quay. 4. Immediate access to the site from the road network. 5. Proximity of railway station. 6. Existing buildings capable of adapting to new use. 7. 155 acres, 62.7 hectares, of vacant site to receive new development. 8. New transport link with the South Quays possible. 9. Scale of the site is large enough to be compatible with that of passenger cruise liners docking in Waterford. 10. The site offers a variety of potential functions as part of the development. 11. Existing access points occur at strategic locations. Part 4. Objectives of Framework Plan for the North Quays Urban Project. 4.1. The city itself. 4.2. Realizing an urban project. 4.3. Site ordering devices. 4.3.1. Reference buildings. 4.3.2. Key nodal points and spaces. 4.3.3. Access and circulation. 4.3.4. Territories. 4.3.5. Existing buildings. 4.3.6. Uses. 4.3.7. Visual axes. 4.3.8. Landscape elements. 4.1 The city. Redeveloping the North Quays will make a substantial impact on Waterford City, economically, physically and socially. The immediate proximity of the quays to the centre of the city, its long river frontage and accessibility to road networks, determine the strength of its location. The disadvantage of poor access between the site and the city centre across the river will have to be addressed in any eventual development. Rotterdam and Bilbao, although on much larger scales, have addressed similar sites in their cities in the last 10 years, on ground that is geographically and administratively located in the centre of the city, but yet economically and physically isolated. In Rotterdam, through the use of a new bridge, the Kop van Zert, a once removed part of the city, is now attached to its centre, and has extended the centre along a new strategic axis. The general approval that the Kop van Zert has enjoyed from the beginning, has been due mainly to the fact that this project represented the City Council's aspiration to give the city a new international allure, and the desire to guarantee that any new urban development scheme should also benefit the existing city and its inhabitants. A social return is ensured, through the exercising of proper control on the material impact of new urban design projects on the existing city. Bilbao's extensive disused port areas were revitalized by Bilbao Metropoli 30. This joint organization has succeeded in bringing together 8 major projects, which will eventually transform the appearance of the existing city, turning it into a center for European trade, tourism and culture. The Guggenheim Museum has already succeeded in making Bilbao an international catchphrase. Europe's physical infrastructure network, road, rail, sea and air is expanding and improving. Cities are locating themselves on the international network irrespective of national location. Waterford is no exception. Already situated close to Rosslare Ferry Port, it has its own regional airport as well as a Europort, and is a nodal point on the national road network. Any vision for the improvement of the city must, like Bilbao and Rotterdam, look at its international context and international potential, as well as to its national and local importance. 4.2 Realizing an urban project. Urban projects, like the vision for the North Quays, currently hold center stage position in discussions on the state of the emerging city of Waterford. Projects concerning vast tracts of ground have become the focus of attention in other cities, where infrastructure expansion and advancement has made almost obsolete the existing city's structured framework. These urban projects primarily through their proximity to transport networks, hold the capacity to become new centralities, different to the traditional city centre. In January 1998, the European Federation held a forum to compose the charters for its fifth competition. Europan is the European Federation for Architectural Competitions. It aims to generate more in-depth knowledge of, and reflection on, housing issues and urban planning, and to promote exchange on this subject among the different countries of Europe. For large urban projects, Europan is of the view that no plans are formally approved, rather there are ideas, which, if they have sufficient force, enable the smaller project to be realized within the general ideas. This ensures private investment is guided towards a compatibility with public investment, in that the ideas proposed by the design team reflect what is beneficial to the city and its inhabitants, and are also economically attractive for private investors. Methods for formalizing an urban project should be adapted to the dynamic evolution of today's town. Instead of seeking a rigid abstract plan or a static definition of the shapes of the objects, the urban project should be placed between two dynamics in the form of town adopted to mobility and also an architectural project whose program is in perpetual motion. Europan 5 underlines what the vision plan for the North Quays has tried to achieve. One of the things architects should be asked is that the formalization of a project is not such that it is immediately destroyed by a rigid implementation process, but that the formal project be founded on the values of space, of moving from one place to another, of landscape etc. And at the same time be strategic and open to the processes of other players. The vision framework proposed for the North Quays is not prescriptive. Rather it highlights the potential of the quay for new development. The particular proposal, which follows, is a possibility that makes both economic and social sense. It can benefit the city, and be achieved within the city's means. 4.3 Site Ordering Devices. Appropriate architectural ordering devices must be established for any proposed development form. These site ordering devices will emerge from both the existing atmosphere of the site and the physical form of the ground. They must be considered, and in some cases must dictate the design process. The North Quays site is a long and narrow strip of ground taking the shape of a slender, elongated S. There is no singular connecting line of vision through the site, rather a number of smaller axes prevail, as a result of the site form. This internal dynamic creates a collection of zones or territories of various spatial proportions and orientations. In moving from one end of the site to the other, one experiences the various qualities of each of the territories. The properties of each differing zone will feature in the design of the overall site layout mainly due to the extensive size and unique shape of the site. A controlled layout cannot be exercised in one volume. Waterford City, in 1998, is not unlike other cities elsewhere in Europe with its declining port activity. Bilbao, as previously mentioned, bears particular resemblance in areas of its abandoned port along the River Nervion. This has recently been regenerated in the face of declining port activity. Similar to the position adopted by the Metropoli 30 Committee in Bilbao, the North Quays in Waterford cannot sustain any economic overhaul based on just continuation of its current activities. It must be treated as new urban ground and be instilled with new functions and activities capable of sustaining and promoting development. First steps in appropriating a proposal for Waterford can be learned from similar urban landscapes in Bilbao, the Kop van Zert in Rotterdam, and the international competition for a phased urban plan for Ooststad in Copenhagen. Traffic access and circulation infrastructure of a suitable urban scale are devices which can give order, form and unity to the entire ground they serve. The infrastructure formed by traffic circulation is an essential part of the public domain and a life source for activity. Landscape elements can be used successfully to order the site. These elements include roads, the river, quays, walls, fences, public open space planting and greenery. Equal attention must be given to the open spaces as well as to buildings, in recognition of their importance in the public realm as event spaces and stages for unprescribed activity. The buildings themselves are obviously regarded as ordering devices. Buildings can control territories around them. When buildings are allowed this function, they take on a dynamic relationship with neighboring buildings. Static block types are dismissed in favor of a number of varied building forms that play off each other, making more exciting and dynamic interstitial spaces. These interstitial spaces are as important as the buildings that surround them. 4.3.1 Reference buildings. In many urban landscapes, buildings function beyond their immediate use, and serve to act as points of reference, benchmarks and navigational instruments for an area. From without, the North Quays need to be comprehended and referred onto benchmark buildings and spaces. Buildings can achieve this reference status by means of their size, form and grouping. The long, strip-like S-plan of the North Quays demands a scattering of such markers along its length. Gaps and open spaces are also necessary as zones of relaxed concentration. Such buildings can offer yet a third function, that of civic use. Towers proposed for the Abandabara area of Bilbao were accepted by the city, only when their top floors became public viewing platforms. To associate such dominant forms only with corporate identity was deemed inappropriate for the city. Reference buildings proposed for Waterford North Quay. 1. Existing church in Abbeylands. 2. Venue building and associated open space. 3. Hotel complex perhaps incorporating existing mill building, and flat store. 4. 3 tower buildings on river edge, apartments and or corporate headquarters. 4.3.2 Key nodal points and spaces. It is vital for any development project of limited economic activity, to be firmly embedded into its urban context. This involves recognizing area where the existing activity can determine the evolution of a part of the new development. The project group for the Kop van Zert in Rotterdam, named 4 intersection or concentration points as places to embed the project terrain into the neighborhood where it is situated. Not only does this action benefit the new development, but it can also reinforce and advance social and economic activity in the existing area. Competitors making proposals for the Ooststad region of Copenhagen, all proposed zones of concentration, dispersed through the region, that in time would grow into each other. The railway station, and the ferrybank residential community surrounding St. Mary's Church, lie at opposite ends of the North Quays. Both of these areas can be reinforced, through the allocation of new compatible activities, to these zones of the quay. Other zones of concentration can be made with new activity. For instance, an anchor project, or an open space, or existing buildings have the physical and functional status to attract other activity. Zones of concentration can coincide with reference buildings and spaces. Nodal points proposed. 1. Railway plaza. 2. Upper pedestrian entrance to site. 3. Hotel Marina. 4. Civic open space. 5. Public space in front of church, connected to a commuter ferry stop. 4.3.3 Access and circulation. As it stands, there are 2 entrances to the North Quays site, across the railway line at the CIE depot and the over the railway bridge on the slip road behind the silos. In making the proposal for the North Quays, other locations were considered as a primary entrance, but were subsequently put aside in favor of the more practical solution. These entrance points feed traffic onto a spine road, which runs parallel to the railway line. This road is not a through road, and only serves the quays. Both ends terminate under new raised platforms, where service accesses and parking are located. Attached to this road are secondary roads which connect into the depth of the site. A commuter ferry links the North and South Quays at their east ends. This will connect the North Quays with the commercial centre of Waterford City and will reinstate an old ferry crossing that brought people from Reginald's Tower to Abbey Church for recreational pursuits in the past. A pedestrian route runs through the site, and along its length this route is enhanced by pedestrian access to the site and by a series of semi-private and public spaces. Unlike the traffic spine, this movement along the site is not strictly controlled and a variety of circulation ways to destinations are available. The proposal for the North Quays will become an entrance to the entire city of Waterford for those arriving in the city by train. At present, train passengers arriving in Waterford are greeted by a very busy traffic roundabout. It is proposed that passengers arriving at the train station in future will arrive on the North Quays by passing safely under the Dock Road. Emerging from under the Dock Road, the visitor will get their first glimpse of Waterford City, an oblique view of the full length of the historic South Quay across the river. 4.3.4 Territory? Buildings and spaces can, by their presence, define and control an area around them. The size of this territory depends on the size, form and location of the building or space. Currently, the North Quays has quite large territories defined by the open container space, the silo and mill buildings, and also an area at the west end, which in previous times was occupied by 4 cranes that ran along tracks. These old controlling elements are large-scale. It takes only 3 or 4 of them to ensure that no space on the quays is an undefined space. However, as these elements are being removed, more and more spaces have assumed the character of an undefined, unsure, unsafe place. In this report, structures are proposed of a size and scale inherent in the area, and positioned at intervals along the quays so as to define respective territories. Together they work as a unit controlling the entire site, leaving no area undefined. This definition of space does not involve physical demarcation. Spaces merge into each other, allowing determined, spontaneous and multiple activities to occur. Other buildings locally reinforce each of the controlling elements. Proposed ordering of territories: 1. Venue building and associated space. 2. Hotel. 3. Towers. 4. Long terrace of mixed uses. 4.3.5 Existing buildings. Although many abandoned elements of the North Quays are being removed, it is important not to assume that future development needs cleared, empty ground. Rather than create a new urban area with a new internal scale, or mimic the scale and arrangement of the South Quays, new development can stem from the scale and arrangement already inherent on the site. This scale is large in comparison to the prevailing domestic scale of the South Quay facades, but is in harmony with its contextual landscape. The dominating landscape never allows the quay itself to be viewed in isolation. Instead, it is seen as part of a greater picture composed of a high steep hill, a large slab hotel building, wide primary roads, a cliff face and long railway station building. Any future development will be read against this same landscape and must therefore be of an appropriate scale, in order to become part of the composition. Existing buildings, when appropriate for reuse, are an organic cell that can stimulate new development proposals. Buildings with potential for reuse are: 1. Mill building, perpendicular to river. 2. Flat store to rear of silo complex, parallel to river. 4.3.6 Uses. Currently, a mixture of uses combined with less density of consolidated urban fabric, green areas, and an overall diversity, are the concepts internationally pursued for contemporary urban areas. Public buildings and activities are cited among commercial and residential areas, in order to achieve a level of activity sufficient to sustain areas of common multipurpose use. New, semi-independent centers need much economic activity to sustain them, as is evident in the Port 2000 Center in Barcelona. In an area that is not being rebuilt for an existing use, and an area with no existing community, it is vital that the mixed-use arrangement extends to the individual building. An urban plan undertaken by Pawson Williams Architects, for the Plaine du Pas in Cayes, France, and not unlike the North Quays in Waterford, advocated the continental section. Residential accommodation occupies the higher floors of a building in which the lower 2 or 3 floors house retail and office activities. Levels of activity increase as a result, as does the chance of incidental encounter, which in turn attracts people and avoids the scenario of areas shutting down at the end of the working day. 4.3.7 Visual Axes. Visually, the North Quays is an exposed site area. Views penetrate its depth from every direction, making it virtually transparent. Unlike the South Quays, it isn't composed of a strip facade with buildings behind. It consists of a number of free-standing buildings, surrounded by their associated grounds, and it is in wide views and vistas, principally from the south, that it is assembled as a whole. From any position on the South Quays a view of the entire North Quay is offered. Framed views are afforded along the streets running perpendicular to the quays. Thus the North Quays is the backdrop for the South City. Approaching the city along the national roads from the north or east, views over and through the North Quays to the south give the first glimpses of Waterford. These roads continue to fall down to river level as they swing to run parallel along the edge of the quays until they converge at Rice Bridge. Always above the level of the quays, they offer views that overlook the city. Passenger cruise liners dock in Waterford during the summer season. They travel up the river shore approaching Waterford, and the North Quays are their first view, with the landscape rising steeply behind it. Rather than docking on the south bank as previously, the cruise liners will dock on the North Quays against a landscape of a similar scale, and which in the past was the shipbuilding area as well as the docking location for many ships arriving in Waterford. Within the North Quays a series of perspective views connect each part to the whole. Visual axes in proposal. 1. Sequence of internal views through sight. 2. Views of the South City afforded through development on the North Quays. 3. Views from the South Quays. 4. Views from the South City framed by streets perpendicular to river. 5. External overlooking views into sight. 4.3.8 Landscape elements. Quote, "The most interesting mechanism in an urban project is the choice of the elements that are each independent of the other. Nuno Portas, Management of the Urban Realm. Landscape elements include street furniture, ground surfaces, railings, planting, advertising boards and signage. Attention must be paid to these elements when launching individual projects resulting from the framework for the North Quays. These are the elements that can provide a design unity, an architectural language, and a constant through the development process, and in the final built reality. Their design should be considered at an early stage in the overall process." Part 5. Proposed projects and opportunities. These are: Commuter Ferry, Spine Road, Pedestrian Walk, Hotel and Marina, Venue Building, Mixed Development, Cruise Liner Docking Station, and Public Spaces. 5.1. Commuter Ferry. The development of Waterford City was confined to the south of the river shore until the construction of Timbertoes Bridge in 1793. However, there were ferries that connected Munster to Leinster as early as the 12th century. The earliest map to show the ferry connection is the 1764 Scale and Richards map, in which the ferryboat slip is shown opposite the end of Conduit Lane, and the original ferrybank was directly across the river. During the 19th century, when Waterford was a major shipbuilding centre, many people crossed the river by ferry to attend the launching ceremonies in Ferrybank. At the turn of the century, many Waterford families enjoyed excursions northwards across the river, to the pleasant wooded surroundings at the Waterford Boat Club. The last remaining ferry across the river was electrified in 1942, but was discontinued in 1949 when the old ferryboat was deemed to be unseaworthy. The introduction of a new passenger ferry across the river is an essential element of the vision for the North Quays. For the development to be viable and sustainable, it is important that it is firmly linked to the heart of the city on the south bank. It is therefore proposed that a passenger ferry will run from or adjacent to the new marina beside Reginald S. Tower and the proposed Millennium Square. The ferry dock on the North Quays will be at the area to be designated as a public space in front of Abbey Church. Apart from facilitating normal community requirements arising from the proposed North Quays development, a new community school is proposed for Ferrybank in the near future, and the passenger ferry together with the reinstatement of a pedestrian bridge over the railway line, will make it readily accessible. In addition, the development of the North Quays will provide for a pedestrian route directly from the platform of the railway station, into historic Waterford via the ferry, without having to cross any major roads. 5.2, Spine Road. Vehicular access to the North Quays development is essential for it to be viable. There is however no existing vehicular traffic route through the site. Access will be maintained via the existing bridge over the railway line and the level crossing at the existing Rockshire Road traffic lights. These will feed the Spine Road that runs almost the length of the back of the site, servicing all the major commercial buildings and residential developments. The Spine Road will follow a route through the back, north, of the site going through and under the developments, linking buildings by spurs at right angles to the river. 5.3. Pedestrian Walk. Pedestrian access through the North Quays development is an important element of the vision. The pedestrian walk is not simply a functional path at the river edge, but takes the visitor through various spaces and experiences. The North Quays development will have direct pedestrian access from the main platform of the railway station, under the road bridge to give the first full-length vista of the South Quays. This vista will give a much improved first impression of Waterford, distinct from the existing view across a busy traffic junction. The visitor then has a choice to either take a riverside walk, or to take the more direct route beside a terrace of small-scale commercial and retail outlets. The walk continues through a series of mixed developments where it deviates through a series of public spaces on different levels, sometimes at a lower riverside walk or occasionally at an upper pedestrian street. The walk continues through the depth of the site, stringing together a series of semi-private courtyards, and terraces in the residential areas, and public spaces associated with the hotel, the venue building, and the public space at the ferry dock. The path then continues on downstream as an amenity, becoming a semi-rural path with picnic areas and possibly fishing points. 5.4. Hotel and Marina. The vision for the North Quays suggests that two existing buildings may be retained and converted, the existing flour mill and an adjacent flat store. The structure of the flat store is ideally suited for conversion to a multi-story car park for the hotel. The flour mill, together with a new structure of similar dimensions, could form the hotel. The inclusion of these two existing structures in the vision is designed to give an indication of scale, orientation and character to the envisaged built development, as well as the spaces created between the structures. The proposed hotel will have between 60 and 100 beds, as well as a high standard of public facilities with unique aspects and views of the city. It is also proposed that the hotel would have its own marina. The main access to the hotel and marina is from a landscaped public space in front of the venue building. It is envisaged that this public space will itself become a venue for fringe events related to the main activity in the venue building, whether it be conferences, exhibitions or concerts. As well as acting as a forecourt to the hotel, it also puts the venue building into a public space, and affords a generous disembarking plaza in scale with docking cruise liners. 5.5. Venue building. The venue building is envisaged as a major civic building that will provide a location for a very wide range of activities, that will draw large numbers of people to Waterford. It will in the future grow to represent the city for many of its visitors, as well as becoming the symbol or icon for contemporary Waterford. While a specific brief for this project will require detailed research, it is suggested that this proposed venue building will provide conference facilities for up to 800 people, with backup facilities for catering, exhibitions and so on. The public space between the venue building and the hotel provides an appropriate foreground between the building and the river for fringe and overflow activities. 5.6. Mixed development. Residential buildings. Residential development is mixed with commercial, retail and office developments throughout the site. There are 3 10-story high towers, located on the waterfront, to the west of the hotel, at least 2 of which would be used completely for apartments, the third could be used all or in part as a corporate headquarters. It is recommended that there is a mix of apartment size throughout the development. It is also recommended that there should be a mix of privately owned dwellings, as well as local authority social housing, and that rental accommodation should be included in the development. Retail buildings. Retail premises will be available throughout the North Quays development. These will range from smaller-scale newsagents, grocers, cafes, print shops in the area adjacent to the railway station, to more upmarket boutiques, souvenir shops, bistros and restaurants in the area between the venue building and the new public space in front of Abbey Church. It is proposed that there will be accommodation for larger retail outlets at quay level, in the mixed development to the west of the hotel. Office buildings. A substantial floor area of office space is envisaged for this development, mixed with retail and residential accommodation and distributed throughout the site. It is proposed that office premises suitable for telesales be located near the west end of the site. This has the potential to be linked to additional offices located beside the dock road but north of the railway. This site would be linked by a pedestrian bridge across the railway line to upper levels of office development on the quays. A corporate headquarters building could be provided from one of the 3 tower blocks proposed, and it is also proposed that there will be smaller-scale office accommodation, available directly above retail premises throughout the site. 5.7. Cruise liner docking station. The vision provides for a docking station for cruise liners beside the venue building. The provision of a docking station will, it is hoped, increase both the numbers of cruise liners visiting Waterford, and increase the time that the visitors spend in Waterford. The location of the proposed cruise liner docking station has been selected to provide the most appropriate setting in scale with large cruise liners. The range of facilities to be provided at the North Quays could in time be of added value to cruise companies because of their immediate adjacent availability to docking liners. The combined value of the docking liners and the venue building could be of value to local and national interests and indeed international interests too. 5.8. Public spaces. There are a series of public spaces proposed throughout the development. The largest public space acts as a forecourt for both the venue building and the hotel and marina. It is envisaged that this public space would itself become a venue for fringe events related to the main activity in the venue building, whether it be conferences, exhibitions or concerts, or as a forecourt for the hotel. It will also afford a generous disembarking plaza for passengers from cruise liners, in scale with a docked liner. The second major public space is the area in front of Abbey Church. This will have more of the character of a small town square, or neighborhood. It forms the focus of the primary pedestrian access from the existing community in Ferrybank, as well as the gathering point for those using the proposed commuter ferry. The third public space is at high level in the mixed development to the west of the proposed hotel. Here access is afforded to the quays from Dock Road by crossing a second proposed pedestrian bridge across the railway line. This public space will give high-level views across the river. There are also opportunities for secondary public spaces at the entrance to the quays from the railway station, and at the marina beside the hotel. There is also scope for smaller semi-private spaces to be created, particularly on upper levels, for the enjoyment of the residents of the development. It is recommended that developers be encouraged to implement the government policy in relation to the Percent for Art scheme. This will allow for the incorporation of works of art and craftworks into these landscaped public spaces. Waterford North Quays Steering Group R. Martin Cullen TD. Eddie Breen. John Clancy. Klaus Unger. Angela Rolfe. Michael Guilfoyle. John McCarthy. End of report.